Well, we can ask our next guest. He's a quarterback expert, of course, played quarterback in Notre Dame and in the NFL, now a Fox College football analyst and NFL analyst for CBS Sports HQ. It's Brady Quinn. What's up, Brady?
What's up, Junkies? How we doing this morning?
Hey Brady.
Pal.
Good morning, man.
Doing all right. You know, Brady's in kind of the picking games business. I see a lot you with our guy Will Brinson, right?
Yeah. It's just it's trying to rein Will in sometimes with the way he goes about making some of these picks. I don't know if he actually believes in the picks that he makes, or if he's really just trying to fade Pete Prisco. Pete and him have quite the rivalry going.
That's the move. Hey, listen, here I've always said, if you could just fade anybody, just pick anybody. It doesn't even matter if they're good or bad, because no one's really that good. You will win.
No.
Just fade anybody, and you will win.
It's good to be the house. You be the book. You take the bets, and you profit. You make all the money.
So, Brady, before we get into
that's not necessarily legal yet.
Oh,
yeah.
no. I'm just,
So, Brady, before we get in the NFL, why don't we ask you about Notre Dame's game? You excited? You pumped for this game?
Yeah, no, I'm extremely excited. I think Notre Dame's got a great chance. They've got one of the top defenses in the country that, no one talks about. No one gives them enough credit. Their backbone's their secondary. They've got a kid, guys, named Kyle Hamilton. He's a sophomore. He was a freshman All-American last year. He's 6'3". He's about 215 pounds. He moves well. He covers well. He's got great football instincts. He will most likely be gone after next year, after 2021, to head to the draft. And then they've got a sixth-year player in Sean Crawford. He's really versatile. Plays their nickel slot, plays safety. He allows them to do a bunch of different things, but that's their backbone. Their front, led by a veteran guy, Dalen Hayes, can get pressure, just rushing 4. So they've got a solid group. That's what will keep them in this game, taking on a freshman quarterback in his first road start. And if they can stop Etienne, that's the whole key. Notre Dame's not going to be able to just run the football down their throat if they can't stop Etienne and some of the big plays from Clemson's offense. So that, to me, is the biggest key. Then you start talking about the offense. They're going to try to dominate the line of scrimmage with those big 5 offensive linemen and tight ends, and then allow Ian Book to make some plays with his feet and then also through the air. So keep an eye on their tight end, the freshman tight end, Michael Mayer. That kid is a big-time mismatch. He's a heck of a player.
So before we get to the NFL, let's stick with college football because we were kind of talking about it here in Washington. They drafted Dwayne Haskins last year. It hasn't worked out, so some people are already focusing in on, who's going to be available in the draft next year. They're unlikely to have the top pick, which is going to probably be Trevor Lawrence. Maybe they'll have the second pick. We'll see. They're not a good team, but there are a lot of bad teams in the NFL, as you know. How do you see the quarterbacks that are likely to come out, including Trevor, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson at BYU? How do you see those top guys?
Well, I view it as basically it's Trevor Lawrence and then kind of everyone else, and that's just more of what we've seen him do throughout his career, from the time he was a freshman to what he was still doing this year. He's got the highest floor. He's got the highest ceiling, in my opinion. I'm a huge fan of this kid. I think he's the best talent I've seen in God knows how long. I mean, and he's over Andrew Luck in that regard. So
wow.
This kid's got it all. And I think that next tier is Fields and Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. Those two will go 2 and 3, probably somewhere in the top 10, top 12. And then you can kind of start talking about some of the other guys. Zach Wilson's been phenomenal, but people are going to say the system, who they're going up against. Does he have the arm strength, the size, all those things? He's very capable. But, as far as the rest of the quarterbacks in this class, I would say it's a little too early to kind of evaluate any of them as being back-end, first-round guys. It's those 3 I could definitively tell you right now from watching what they've done and the skills they possess that will go in the first round.
Brady, is it weird for people in Big Ten country, especially Ohio State fans, they're ranked 3rd right now in the AP Top 25, to look 3 spots down at number 6 and to see Cincinnati ranked in the top 10? I mean, this is a team that, always fights for headlines with Ohio State in the Buckeye State. And look at them. They're in the top 10. That's impressive.
It's incredibly impressive. And it's one of the bright spots about, COVID and the year 2020 is we got early on, because of how some of these conferences started playing before others, to see some of the group of 5 teams that are really, really good football teams. Luke Fickell's done a tremendous job at Cincinnati. And, I think he's going to be in a really, really tough spot after this year because depending on what happens in Texas, depending on how things go at Michigan, he might have to make one of those sorts of decisions where he might have to, leave to go take one of those top programs. And, again, it's not easy necessarily to kind of leave those routes and do it, but I think Luke Fickell could build a program anywhere. I really do. I think he's that good of a coach, a recruiter, everything else. So they're a special team. Ritter, their quarterback, has played well this year. Their defense has been stingy. So I would give them a shot versus most teams. As far as being number 6, it may be a little high in my opinion. I think they're a top 10 team. I don't know that they're number 6 in the country. Once we get the Pac-12 playing this upcoming weekend, I think we'll get some more teams that maybe will leapfrog them at some point.
Talking to Brady Quinn. Brady Quinn, of course, former NFL quarterback, Notre Dame quarterback. Now he's with Fox College Football, and he does NFL analyst for CBS Sports HQ. Let's jump over to the NFL game. We kind of were wondering, and since you're a quarterback, I want your take on this, about Daniel Jones. We're going to see him against Washington this week. Daniel Jones at times looks really, really good, but he just can't get over the turnover bug. How do you see a guy like Daniel Jones?
Well, I think the first thing is you talked about how at times he looks really, really good. I mean, that's why he was drafted. He was drafted for 2 reasons. One, you saw that top-end talent or ability as far as the throws he can make downfield. He's a good athlete. Everyone makes fun of how he's like Eli Manning 2.0. He's a much better athlete than Eli was, and that's not a slight to Eli. Eli was a better athlete. People gave him credit, but Daniel Jones can legitimately run. It's just his hardest thing is continuing to run when they're in the open field and then heading towards the goal line. That's apparently the scariest thing he's got to encounter. But in all seriousness, I think it's a number of things. I combed back through some of his film at Duke and just kind of looking at some stuff because I didn't see some of the issues that he's facing now with New York compared to his time at Duke when he was with David Cutcliffe, who's, like a quarterback whisperer, if you will, at that level. And that was kind of the other reason he got drafted, I think, is he had the stamp of approval of David Cutcliffe, who worked with Eli, worked with Peyton, all those guys. And it was different then. And I think also he wasn't put in a position where he had to make a bunch of plays. That's the position he's in now. His defense isn't very good. He doesn't have a ton of weapons out around him. His best player's not even on the field. The protection's been spotty. So, those things attributed, to it. So maybe he's pressing, maybe he's forcing things when he doesn't need to. But the ball security in the pocket is the tough one because, there's not too many fixes. Like you can everyone talks about keeping 2 hands on the football. That's not going to stop a defensive end from knocking it out of your hands. I don't care how tight you're gripping that thing. If that DN hits that football just right while you're sitting in the pocket looking downfield, the ball's coming out. And so they've got to do a better job of giving him protection. He's got to do a better job of getting the football out. But that doesn't excuse some of the terrible decisions and interceptions that he has thrown. That's kind of the surprising thing. So I don't know if it's a new system with Jason Garrett this year. Maybe he's still working through that, and he's not seeing the field quite as well. But he's also thrown some bad interceptions that are just inexcusable at a certain time.
Brady, let's talk about a quarterback that's really impressing at a young age. Justin Herbert, just 22. In his last 4 games, 13 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. I mean, he's really breathed some life into that Chargers offense. Talk about the way he's played so far this rookie season in L.A.
I got to be honest with you guys. There's not many guys that you see in college come from a certain system and then excel in the NFL like Herbert has. But it's kind of an indictment on what they were doing his final year at Oregon. And, it just wasn't a system that played to his strengths. They didn't really incorporate him quite as much as part of the run game. They didn't really stretch the field vertically like we're seeing the Chargers do. Now, granted, they have the personnel to do so, but this system is tailor-fit to what he does well, and I think that's why he's excelling, along the lines of the fact that they've got some other guys for him to throw to and make some plays. So he's been spectacular. I think everything that we thought he was going to be as far as being a good decision maker, a strong arm, good athlete, all those things, that was on display during his time at Oregon. To me, I think the biggest difference was, how would that transition work out within the system he's running? And this one is more Taylor Fitz, I think, everything that he does well. So that's a team to keep an eye on for the future. They just got to figure out a way of holding a lead. And I don't think that's his fault. I think that's more of, Anthony Lynn, their head coach, trying to figure out a way of holding on to some of these double-digit leads that they keep blowing over the past 5 weeks besides the Jacksonville game.
All right, so let's get back to Daniel Jones and the Giants. They face Washington this week. Big NFC East battle. One team has 2 wins, one team has 1 win, but they're both still in the mix. How do you see this game playing out on Sunday? You don't have Pete Prisco to fade right now. And how do you see the division playing out? Carson Wentz is a quarterback in Philadelphia. They've got the lead, but he's been awful, and they got a brutal schedule.
Yeah, no, we actually just talked about this game, Pete Prisco, Will Brinson, and myself, and we all agreed. We all feel more confident in what Washington is for a few reasons. I mean, look, the Giants are coming off a short week. That never plays to your advantage just as a player recovering, especially in the era of COVID, with the way you game plan and things work out. Washington's got that 2-week advantage. And really, it's the defensive front, versus the Giants' offensive line. That's been their weak point all year. You see Golden Tate frustrated about not getting enough touches. I mean, this entire offense is frustrated. So I think the defense will be able to keep this, a low-scoring game. Washington should be able to run the football well enough and have McLaurin and Logan Thomas make a couple of plays in the passing game to get them the win. So I like Washington in this one. I really do. I think the extra time to prepare and just their defensive front, versus that offensive line is only going to lead to, 1 or maybe 2 turnovers from Daniel Jones in that offense.
All right, so Brady, let's go beyond that. So if Washington beats the Giants this week, if you're right, of course the Eagles are on bye, then they're just a half game back in the division. All right, you can pretty much bury the Giants. We've all kind of buried the Cowboys based on what's happening in there. So it's a 2-horse race. How do you see the rest of the season playing out in the NFC East?
I mean, it's hard to think that Washington's going to win the division. I definitely don't think the Giants will. Obviously, Dallas isn't. But
have you looked at Philly's schedule?
Well, no, the schedule's tough, but it's not even, forget the schedule for a second.
Okay.
If Carson Wentz doesn't play better, it doesn't matter.
Right.
He has been awful at times this year. The 2 strip sacks that he took, I mean, the first one was there was really no excuse for him not just get out of the pocket and throw the football away. And it's almost like ever since he had that knee injury, he doesn't know, when he takes off, what he wants to do. He looks so indecisive. Quarterback play is a lot about confidence and decisiveness. Even when you're wrong, if you are decisive and confident in your decision, sometimes you can make a wrong play right, or sometimes you can make a play or make something out of nothing. Right now, when he buys time, he, for whatever reason, doesn't. He's like, I want to go downfield, but I kind of don't. So now I'm hanging in no man's land, and then he gets his head blown off, and the football's out. So between that and some of the poor interceptions he's thrown, I'm concerned because, I think Philly in the end has enough to be able to win, even with their schedule. They're talented enough. They're the one team kind of surviving in that regard, but not the way he's playing right now. So it's Washington and Philly, and if he doesn't clean things up, maybe Washington's going to slide in and take it.
Did you play with anybody during your days in the NFL that just had an awful year kind of for no reason? Because if you look at Carson Wentz, the previous 3 seasons, he had 7 interceptions in each of those seasons. And I understand that he's had, dealing with a lot of injuries. We saw in week 1 the offensive line was in shambles and Washington got to him 8 times. But, I mean, it's just a dreadful year from Carson Wentz out of nowhere. Did you play alongside anybody like that just had a down year?
No, not really. I mean, I guess, Derek Anderson, my first year, had a Pro Bowl caliber year. The more odd thing about that year was at home he was incredible. On the road, it was man, it was 2 different people. And so I remember as a rookie, watching that thing, and, there wasn't that big of a difference, I didn't feel in playing on the road and playing at home in the NFL. But, I think the older I got, the more I started to kind of respect the home field advantage and the advantage it creates, especially the pressure it puts on a quarterback. But that was the only one that really comes to mind. And it was just the dichotomy between home and away games for his statistical numbers. But yeah, no, it's really hard to put your finger on what it is because you can talk about injuries. They dealt with that last year, and he was able to overcome it and win the division last year. So there's really no excuse. And by the way, they've gotten healthier. They got Jason Peters back last week. They had Jalen Reagor back last week. They're only getting healthier, and yet those. And by the way, he was going up against a third-string quarterback where I don't know why he felt the need to press. Were you really concerned about Ben DiNucci in a shootout with you? Are you really feeling like you need to throw the football or hang on to the football too long because you're worried about DiNucci for the Dallas Cowboys? I mean, it was odd to see the decision-making that he's made in that game and really the rest of the season. But, I still think they have a shot at winning it if he can clean his play up, just because we have seen him play at a really high level.
Hey, Brady, I know I'm kind of bouncing around and back and forth, but I do want your take. In your career, I'm sure that you wish you had more opportunity, like more starts and a little bit more of a runway. And here in Washington, of course, Ron Rivera pulled the plug on Dwayne Haskins after 4 games. A lot of us thought he might be dealt in trade deadline. Seems like, Rivera and his guys didn't draft Dwayne Haskins. He was inherited. How do you see the career of Dwayne Haskins playing out? Do you think the NFL is just done with him as a starter? Like, is it over that quickly?
I don't know that it's over that quickly, but there's no doubt. Once the guy who drafted you, whether the general manager and the coach, once those guys are no longer there and you don't have people advocating for you, It's over, man. Like, it's over. No one's going to give you that chance. You're going to have to fall into a situation where there's a quarterback competition, or really you end up getting that job because someone else ahead of you played bad or someone gets hurt. And unfortunately, that's now the road he's got to take, and it stinks. But it's one of my biggest issues with the NFL is, they ruin more careers of quarterbacks because they don't realize that many of these organizations are so poorly run. And it's like, I don't care how talented any of these guys are. It doesn't matter if you don't have an owner that cares and knows what he's doing, or a general manager and a head coach that can be around for a little while so he's got stability, but also can implement a system that plays to his strengths. I mean, you get some of these coaches who, they don't know how to adapt to the strengths of the player and be flexible to what the player needs. And instead, they're just like, well, this is my system. This is what we do. If you don't fit in, I'm going to bring in my own guy. And it's
Jay Gruden.
Well, that means you're a bad and then that means you're a bad coach. Like, I'm sorry.
Right.
Like, you'd be a good play caller, but that doesn't mean you're a good coach. Those are two different things. So it's unfortunate because the kid's talented. I hope he finds himself somewhere else. He would be a guy that I would love to see go to San Francisco because he's athletic enough to be in Kyle Shanahan's system. A lot of talk right now about Jimmy Garoppolo, his contract. We don't know if he's going to come back this season. He's a guy that should be on a lot of people's radar, send him up to Green Bay as kind of a hedge on if Jordan Love works out or not. Because I'll tell you this much, I would take Haskins over Jordan Love, at least from what I saw from Jordan Love's college film.
Wow.
So there's a ton of people I think are going to want to bring him in, kick the tires on him, make sure they know what they have in him because he could sling it. I mean, you guys saw moments of that.
Of course.
You put him on a better football team, I think he can excel. I think he'll have a decent career if he can get his feet underneath him again.